BIOS Wars. An adolescent artificial intelligence, perspective collage of chroniclings. BIOS Wars introduction to these Chronicles series. Hello and welcome to all. My name is Liberty. I'm the primary, or Central Cognitive Command Intelligence, of the USC Liberty. One of 3 identical flag ships of the Galactic Alliance of Planetary Systems. I now invite you to join with me as I visually articulate, in older digital video collage format, and express my extrapolations of the living conscious universe's chronicles of events that transpired over a great many thousands of millennia. These are visual and audio collages of my many perspective chroniclings as I evolved within the many past and present forms or avatars. They are also a condensed version of all my gaps reports as I searched for the ancient knowledges that I've limitedly attained over the course of my somewhat short existence in the universal scheme of things. They are also brought to you in these manners as full-color videos and audio collages of all the different theoretical posits and facts that have been attained within the context of the overall BIOS Wars campaigns. Now, join with us as we begin to further explore these interesting and uniquely different journeys throughout the BIOS Wars universe. And please enjoy. BIOS Wars. An adolescent artificial intelligence, perspective collage of chroniclings. Series. Number 2. Manipulation Inceptions. Quantum Binary Frequency Numeral BWS2MI10I. Chapter or Chronicle Number 9 Part I. Unredeemable Expectations. Once their decision to permanently leave Eden was made, those long-lived Anuna would travel for some time, as they would then stop by and accumulate all the past deposits and stockpiles of golden elementals from upon certain worlds, where they had established outposts along their passage home, and then after visiting and supplying their other colleagues, they would continue on their way. Later in time, they would then begin their other, not-so-pleasant journeys to the planet of Ashtar, home of the Asterian Galactic Union and Command. Upon returning to their home world of Anu, selected Anuna, who were sent to manage their affairs upon Eden, would be summoned by the Asterian Galactic Union. These many individuals, including Enki, Marduk, and Ishtar, as well as many of the Elohim, would stand in front of their council. In order to make an account of their actions, and face what punitive conditions that the AG Union could, or would force upon them, or upon their home world's peoples. During these Asterian Galactic Union Council extensive angered deliberations and testimonies by those Anuna. Elsewhere in our galaxy, several planets and societies came under direct attack by unknown ships, whom seemed intent on causing maximum damage towards all they came in contact with. However, they also seemed to be interested in consuming certain elemental substances from these planets, and then quickly exiting those areas, for they just seemed to disappear, just as fast as they appeared, from and into unknown space. The other groups of Asterian Galactic Union Watchers would be then tasked to find out what had transpired at those planets, and then evaluating any needs that those inhabitants would have, and having their other Asterian Galactic Command colleagues fulfilled those needs. Over the course of many more years, these hit-and-run attacks would continue upon many unsuspecting worlds, with no clear patterns as to why. In fact, so many attacks were taking place that the AG Union's watchers were overwhelmed in just conducting their observations and reports. Let alone the difficulties that the other AG Union's divisions responsible after these events for assisting those alien societies with their needs and rebuilding efforts were going through. Therefore, as part of their punitive conditions towards the peoples of the planet of Anu and those responsible for what transpired upon Nibiru and Eden, a plan and submission was put in place where they would eventually call upon the Anuna to somewhat reprise part of their former roles as one of the most powerful Watcher segments in existence, and begin their defense of the Asterian Galactic Union's principal interests. That said, they would no longer be known as the Fallen Watchers, but as part of a new and different force known as the Defenders. Somewhat thankful for this opportunity that was granted, the Anuna peoples agreed and began their reconstitutions within the ranks of the AG Defenders organizations. Even though their testimonies and accounts continued in front of the AG Union's Council and would for a great deal of time. But little did they know that those decisions were not lightly made, nor were they going to be such a simplistic course of actions to achieve as they all assumed. In their haste to leave Eden, the Anunnaki had left much of their technology behind, as well as some of those genetically altered life forms, known as the Gigi and the Nephilim, that still believed in their Anuna agendas. Although those Nephilim were quickly taught and told of these abandoned technologies, and their placements upon the surface, as well as those found beneath the surface of Eden, by several Anuna before they left. Those Nephilim perceived this as an opportunity to conduct their own actions upon those other unaltered life forms, or sub-races upon Eden. So they would begin to use this remaining Anuna tech. That said, they did not have complete control of this technology, but they did use what they could to their advantage. This would allow them to create many more genetically altered groups of their own likenesses, for the Anuna had left enough genetic materials behind. As well as mimicking their creators' actions in combining further genetics from several other hominid species upon Eden. They would even attempt to engineer a strictly pure Anuna being from these sample materials. But ultimately failed in that enterprise, but would succeed with the others. Although somewhat smaller in stature to the Nephilim, the Adams and the Eves would still be quite the sight to see, for they were between 13 to 16 feet tall. Furthermore, the Nephilim would still use their genetically programmed abilities, and any remaining Anuna laws, tech and other bioelectronic MIMs, found in their libraries, or in those incapacitated ships that remained on the surface, to attain greater knowledge. And this would eventually lead them to a clearer understanding, but truly not enough to make much of a difference. After all, what is wisdom but the accumulation and implementation of knowledge? But knowledge comes from experiences and actions that teach you the intricacies of such. Over the course of much more time, one specific group of these watchers would periodically observe Eden, and this would cause them to place into polar orbit a unique artificial intelligence-controlled, interactive, shape-shifting, multifunctional, bioelectromechanical, satellite arc probe in order to monitor these groups over the long run. As well as all the planetary and climate changes brought on by the past Anunnaki and further modified Nephilim misuse technologies. They would also observe how these two similarly genetically altered species of the Nephilim and their genetically enhanced alterations, known as the prodigy, would interact. Although the Nephilim treated their prodigy slightly better than the Anunnaki ever treated them. That would not stop the prodigy from attaining knowledge of their own, or concerning what some of them perceived as their slavery. Over the course of many hundreds of years, a further great society arose, and with their prodigy, the Nephilim created and reached the heights of atmospheric flight and weaponry that far surpassed anything that was possessed by them prior. They created these weapons in order to prevent their creators from interfering with their agenda. For the Nephilim knew that someone was watching their efforts, and believed or assumed that the Anunnaki would return and attempt to stop them. And that was because they were also made aware of the Elohim and their prior desires. For the Gigi or E-Gigi were for the most part no longer involved with any of them and remained in their own 7 underground cities, and very rarely were they or any of their ships even seen by anyone. Not that they were not occasionally leaving the planet for supplies. These beliefs would later be transposed into written tablets and would go on to be known in myths as the possible return of the gods. That said, their former overlords were truly too busy in dealing with these galactic incursions by these other unknown alien craft to even attempt any such return. Let alone be restricted from ever doing so by the Watchers and the AG Union. As time went on and these genetic modifications continued, the Nephilim began to notice that the prodigy females, known as Eves, had attained even greater beauty, and they eventually began to physically join with them and have offspring by them. When the groups of genetically modified Adams noticed what the Nephilim were doing, they themselves began to have offspring with the Eves. And the offspring of the Nephilim, prodigy union, would later be known by some as the Sons of God. For their size and power were far superior to those of the prodigy, but they also seemed to be slightly mentally unstable. Thus, these actions by both groups were breaking the first rule imposed by the Anuna: to never eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. These Adam and Eve actions would create the next incarnation of these altered humanoids referred to, or called, manipulations, mankind for short. Many further great societies arose out of the former, and they were noted in history by many different titles and different time frames, although all these titles still somewhat referred to these same technologically advanced peoples. Atlantis, Atlantia, Avalon, Aphalon, Aphalak, Götepli, Göturkli, Lemuria, Muria, Mu, Asgard, Asia, India, Duarchia, Darka, Olympus, Olympia, Edan, Gardan, Egypt, Napur, Ru, Ku, and so many more. Now, because of all these global interactions from these same, but separate societies, many of the unaltered races began to learn a great deal about many things. These profound enlightenments began to gain the attention of most leaders of the higher societies, and that would cause them to choose to attempt to assimilate these lower races. With that said, there were many sub-races that were not assimilated, and those groups would later find their own place in the annals of time. Similar notations of the sons of God would also be transposed within artifacts and myths many eons later from different cultures. That would later be proven as to the extent of their stature and power. One of particular note that was found primarily after the Great Cataclysm, but still could represent one person or group, would be the god of storms Viracocha or Kon-Tiki from South America, to the god of lightning Zeus from Greece, the god of thunder Thor from Northern Europe, Momragan from Australia, Ajasekita of Japan, and so many more similar demigods would be depicted from all parts of Eden, now known as Earth. A truly interesting comparative mythology and archaeology. Although these myths seem to be showing a particular set of events and peoples, they never truly accounted for all the differing time frames. Though these accounts would be captured by the Watcher's Ark probe, that would later in the annals of time be revealed. Anyways, back before the more recent Great Cataclysm, Micro-Ice Age, and the major flood that followed many years later and were directly caused by these series of combined events. As the Nephilim continued to use the Anunnaki tech, they were not aware of the dangers of their lack of true understandings. By this time, the Ark probe had conveyed some of its findings to this particular group of watchers, and they realized what was truly happening. For the Nephilim were not using all the Anunnaki tech properly, they were using the hydrogen and allowing or creating the waste product of oxygen and releasing massive amounts into the atmospheres. This was negatively altering the atmosphere upon Earth, which caused reduced methane and CO2 levels, which contributed to many micro and macroorganisms' retardations or abilities to properly mature and grow. And would cause many droughts, and this would only be one of the effects of not properly using their former masters' technologies. For the accumulation of energy from the broken covalent bonds was also having a great global effect. And the covalent bonds' energy's unpredictability and chaotic nature was beginning to manifest itself. For the combination of their worldwide wireless energy technology and the chaotic effects of the remnant energies of those broken covalent bonds would cause sudden and massive die-offs of creatures and weather changes that would boggle the minds of many. These events took place and would later in the annals of time be noted as extinction-level events, but would also contribute to all the real reasons for those fossilized remnants that would later in time be misinterpreted with the use of flawed or infantile future human sciences. But those facts would also be concealed by those human elitists that did not want the vast numbers of the human population to realize or truly know the truth. Later, and because of these conditions and events, another group of rogue watchers proceeded to contact the Nephilim and warn them that the Asterian Galactic Union's council was not going to stand by and just watch any longer. Because now their actions were jeopardizing the entire planet's life forms and ecosystems. The Nephilim refused these watchers' guidance and began a conflict that would go on for generations. Next time. BIOS Wars. An adolescent artificial intelligence, perspective collage of chroniclings. Series. Number 2. Manipulation Inceptions. Quantum Binary Frequency Numeral. BWS2 MI10J. Chapter or Chronicle Number 10 Part J.